Welcome, everybody, to the closing bell. I'm Kelly Evans on a Friday where we have to see exactly how things settle here. But it looks like on this Friday before Mother's Day, we are closing with the Dow Jones Industrial Average setting a new record closing high. Again, 16,580 was the level we were watching. It appears as though we're settling at about 16,583. Meanwhile, the NASDAQ also green today, bucking its recent trend, adding 20. That's about half of a point. The S&P 500, it was fluctuating a little bit in the last hour. It looks to be adding almost 3 points, 1878. Let's get right to it with today's panel, try to make sense of it all and explore the significance of these record highs. We have a special guest with us today. He's Rick Harrison from Pawn Stars. Also, CNBC contributor Howard Dean, our own Mary Thompson, and Robert Frank. And also with us for more on today's market action, Bob Pisani and fast money trader Guy Adami. It is, look, welcome, everybody. Good to see everyone.
You got Rick Harrison there? That is the best show outside of your show, our show. That's the best show on TV, man. Those guys are studs.
I appreciate the caveat, Guy.
Yeah, well,
you got to get down here. Get in the car.
I'm coming now.
Here.
Forget about 5 o'clock. I'm on my way.
Since we've got you at the moment, Guy, what do you think of these markets? Record high looks better today than it might have 3 months ago since we've seen some correction. You know, Rick, you know a thing or two about prices. Welcome, by the way. Great to have you here on set. What do you make of stock prices?
You know, you sort of have to buy stocks if you can't buy bonds, because who in their right mind would buy bonds at these prices? I actually think it's a little higher than it should be, actually. I think there's a small bubble happening.
You know, Kelly, I thought it was really interesting what Mohamed El-Erian was saying. Number one, he said he would take money off the table right now, which was kind of surprising. But he also talked about basically the mispricing of risk around the world, and he phrased it as carry trades. But what he was really talking about is that people are going further out on the risk curve and not really understanding the risk they're taking because they're just chasing yield. And this is all, especially in the high net worth space where I deal with investors that are just looking for those higher returns. It's starting to sound so familiar. 2008, 2009, where everyone who was smart was talking about people are going too far on the risk curve. You're not getting adequate returns for the risk. And I think we're seeing that again.
Right now, this sounds familiar to you guys?
It does sound familiar. You know, it was interesting. I was speaking to one private equity guy who said, you know, I can't, and he deals in the real estate space, and he was saying the people are essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but throwing money at him because they are chasing yield in this low interest rate environment. And even though, you know, Rick pointed out that some people aren't buying bonds, they are buying bonds. Momentum seems to be in a lot of the sovereign bonds, the Italians, the Greek, et cetera, and that's driving yields there to levels that aren't that far apart from the U.S. despite the very different economic situation.
Yeah, I want to talk about this in a second, but I just want to say what a riot is to be on with Rick Harrison. You should see the crowd out here, all the high fives he's getting coming on the floor of the stock exchange. What am I, chopped liver here?
And they all have something to pawn, too.
That's right. So what about this? So let me throw this out for a second. First of all, people got used to really big numbers and big returns until the recession. I think they're going back and hoping they're going to get those kind of returns. They're not. Secondly, I think the Dow is up mainly because you can't get any kind of decent, Rick was talking about this, you can't get decent returns in bonds, so why not go to dividends? And that's exactly what's going on. So I agree with the idea that the non-dividend high-growth stuff was a little too frothy, going down a little bit. I think the stock market is still solid because as long as dividends, interest rates are low and dividends are pretty decent, people are going to buy stocks.
Yeah. I mean, the big problem we had in 2008 was we had artificially low interest rates, and everybody was chasing yields. If you can't get good rates on bonds and everything, you start chasing things. When you start chasing things, things go bad.
Rick,
but Rick, we're not in bubble territory in the overall market. The growth names we were, and I agree on the bonds, a high yield 5% yields on high yield funds is ridiculous.
Yes,
that may be an issue. But the overall market, do you really think it's overpriced?
Yeah, I actually think a lot of things are, some things are, but I think it's actually a little high considering that we really don't have no real growth in the economy, and the stock market keeps on flying up.
I have a question, Rick, in your business. What's fetching the highest price these days? What's the easiest thing for you to sell, and has it changed at all?
Well, the easiest thing to sell is Chumley T-shirts, but my business is a lot different than other people. I have a pawn shop with 5,000 people a day that come into it, so I do a lot of retail.
But
a lot of gold.
It is still the old staples of a pawn shop. I sell wedding sets like crazy. I sell And I have tons of weird antiques that I'm the only person in the world you can get from. So my personal store is a little bit different. But most pawn shops, they're plugging along. Nothing great, nothing bad. There's a lot of misconceptions about a pawn shop. When the economy's bad, a pawn shop doesn't do good because basically you have all sellers and no buyers. And when the economy's on fire, it's the exact opposite.
You know, one thing I'm seeing a lot of, whether it's in Beverly Hills or New York, the expansion of very high-end pawn shops. And I don't understand it because if you look at the wealthy right now, they have a lot of cash. Their stocks are up. Their assets are up. Why do they need pawn shops? And yet you see a brand new one every day here in New York, Beverly Hills, Miami. What's that about?
May I suggest that that's sort of the velocity, not of the money supply, but of the asset supply? In other words, if people sell stuff just because they
have it.
They have it.
Yeah.
And then they buy new stuff.
Okay, and that's not what we would, what I consider the really wealthy anyway. What I consider it is upper middle income who a few years ago bought some very expensive things and might be downsizing or something like that.
So people aren't really pawning their Picassos. I mean, we hear that all the time. You don't see that.
You got to realize a Picasso, you can buy Picassos for as low as $500. You
right.
can buy like the etching Poor Robbie. There was like tens of thousands of them made. So you can buy a Picasso anywhere from $500 to $100 million. There are Picassos that I get in my shop all the time, but they're not the $1 million ones. There's the $5,000 or $10,000 ones.
Right.
Forbes list just changed. It came out like 2 weeks ago. They need to update the Forbes list. Just changed.
In a big way.
Oh my!
Understand that. Oh my! The first billionaire in hip hop, right here from the West Coast. Believe it.
You know, if they'd left the video on Facebook, we wouldn't have to play it so much. Dr. Dre, hip-hop's first billionaire. It could certainly be the case if Apple goes through with the $3.2 billion purchase of Beats Electronics. So, what's a brand new billionaire to do with all that money? Robert Frank here on our panel, also our wealth correspondent. Robert, and you're often talking about the super rich. In this case, Dr. Dre was already rich.
Yep.
Now super rich, but
yep.
Just how much money are we talking about?
So, before this valuation, he was worth around $550 million. This brings him up, by my calculations, to around $800 million. So it doesn't look like he's quite a billionaire. It doesn't matter, right? You're 800, you're a billion.
You think he only gets 10% of the sales price?
No, he's got about 20% of the company. So, you know, it looks at a $3.2 billion sale. He's going to be, whether 800 or a billion, he is the wealthiest hip-hop guy, you know, right up there above Dr., Jay-Z, Puff Daddy, all these
things have a 70% profit margin. We've been getting some interesting tweets, which we'll show at the end of the show, some quite funny ones about how Beats may already be a fad that's passed, but this could be about the streaming music service. But Rick, what do you think?
Well, first off, I mean, they're just not headphones, they're jewelry. I mean, I have teenage kids, okay?
They're plastic jewelry.
But no, I mean, it's a status symbol, and some status symbols stick around for a long time. Look at Gucci, look at Louis Vuitton. There's as long as they keep it hip, it will be around for a long time, and it will be worth a lot of money. And
they needed to buy some cool, right? Apple needed some cool, and they went out and bought some.
I think so. I mean, I think it's a great idea. I mean, look at the profit margin on these things.
Yeah.
And you get Apple behind it, and it's in every Apple store. There's a lot
and
more.
And it's not just the headphones, it's the streaming business, it's the music service that they wanted to get into. Couldn't have happened even 20 years ago. There's somebody that quickly with a company that's 6 years old to become a billionaire.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing, though, that it happens so quickly now?
I saw it happen a lot in the 90s, though.
Not to a billion. Not that fast to a billion. Yeah. I mean, and even if you inflation adjust, we have bigger fortunes created faster today than ever before if you create a good product and sell it. And that is a function of all the capital that's in the world.
So my question from a psychological point of view is, if this is sort of the standard that you can sell your company after 6 years for $1 billion that makes earphones, now can we have some understanding about why it is that certain of these growth stocks get bid up through the ceiling much higher than we would have bid them in the 70s or the 80s?
Man, I have a friend on Tuesday who sold... He basically 5 years ago, a nothing company. He sold it on Tuesday for 80% of it for $360.
Started it on Sunday, sold it on Tuesday. Is that what you're saying?
No, he started it 5 years ago, sold it Tuesday. 80% of it for $360.
Well, the success of your show had something to do with that. Yeah, a lot of it.
He's not going to be coming.
You're going to have a lot of stories to cover, Robert. Basically, straight ahead on the closing bell. You don't have to be a member of the X-Men or any other superhero group to get fired up about the CNBC.com hot list. That's coming up next. Plus, government data often providing economic indicators, but so does activity at pawn shops. Yes, we're going to ask our special guest panelist Rick Harrison what he is seeing from his perch on the hit reality series Pawn Stars. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Welcome back. A couple minutes to go here. We're going to talk about a lot of things that are coming up next week in terms of earnings, in terms of the economy to watch out for. But, Rick, I just want to ask you, since you interact so much on the ground, you're outside Manhattan where a lot of us are stuck, what do you see in terms of how well the economy is doing?
I basically, I consider it completely flat. I don't think there has been several different changes the way that we figured GDP and everything else. So my big problem is, can you really trust the numbers? I mean,
but no, in your own store, you certainly can trust those numbers.
In my store, it's a different world. I have 5,000 people a day coming in my store.
Yeah,
I have,
that's what I want to know. What is it like in your store today relative to how it was in the depths of the financial crisis?
In the depths of the financial crisis, it was literally a nightmare. We have people coming in with tons of construction tools, and I can't even take them. I said, I don't care if you have $50,000.
So it's a fallacy that you do better in bad times.
Well, think about it. I mean, during the bad times, I have all this people coming in with and zero buyers.
You need good times so people buy stuff.
Okay, and then when times are really good, it changes around. I have a hard time getting merchandise, but during the bubble, I mean, construction tools became worthless. Just a lot of things were. It was a bad situation.
So you
for a long
said
time.
it's flat now. Does that mean it's a good time then? Because it's kind of equal, supply and demand?
It's cruising along. I would like to see bond rates a little bit higher. That would make me feel that the economy's better. And I think in spite of everything, I think the American people are going to make it better.
When you start getting $100 million Picassos, then we should worry.
Exactly. I just want to add, by the way, that you had a profitable short trade on Tesla this week. You want to give us a heads up on what your next position is going to be?
I don't know. I think I actually short Tesla again. I think it's an incredible, wonderful company. I just think it's never going to be worth this kind of money.
Wow.
There it stands.